Hello guys, welcome back to Not Just Me guys, Marco here, and today we talk about a lot of stuff. This time I can't summarize everything in few words, so let's see you after the titles. Go, 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 go! This is the first video of a new series that I want to focus on mixing colors from a super limited palette and painting only with brush. In this video you'll see me painting a model in a couple of hours, aiming to a nice standard of quality using a single brush and a palette made only by the three primary tones, cyan, magenta and yellow, plus black and white. It will be more a masterclass than a step-by-step, but I'll give you a lot of useful information during the whole process. This is an exercise that Alfonso Giraldes, aka Banshee, suggested me to really understand color theory and to practice on how to mix paints. It's something that I still do to relax and stretch the mixing muscles, and that sooner or later I ask to do to all my students. If you are looking for a challenge, you can officially consider this as homework. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button to be always updated on what happens on the channel. In my videos I always try to show you new different techniques using a lot of unconventional paints. The idea behind this choice is to show you that there are infinite ways and tools to get to the result you have in mind, and that you have the freedom to use whatever works better for your taste, style and workflow. I use these techniques and the airbrush to speed up to the extreme the painting process, but as I often say in the videos and in the comments, you can do everything with the brush. And all my tricks come from the experience I have painting by brush and the understanding of the basic techniques. Some of you have been enlightened by this concept, starting to explore new exciting ways, while some others have been overwhelmed, finding difficult to relate to all these possibilities. Especially if you are a beginner painter, jumping from acrylics to airbrush, inks and oil paints can be scary, or at least can be difficult to understand the reasoning and the process of their use. The objective of the series is to reconcile these two sides of the audience, closing the gap between orthodox and non-orthodox painters, while delivering a cool masterclass about mixing colors. With this, I absolutely don't mean that I lower my standard to get more views. The channel is clearly directed to people with already a basic knowledge of painting that want to improve and discover new things, or open-minded enough to understand that the world of miniature painting is large and various, and that's the beauty of the hobby. If you want to see base coat, wash, edge highlight, there is a ton of other options for you out there. And after this political manifesto, it's finally time to move to painting.
Here are all the tools I'm going to use, but to be faithful to my own manifesto, I'll try some new paints. Don't freak out. If you want to try this exercise, you can use any paint or brand you like and already have in your collection. It's just paint, it doesn't make this huge difference, really. You know that my first choice for this kind of works are Kimera Kolors, but I always have fun coming out from the comfort zone, and this is useful to show that paint itself is relatively important when you know what you are doing. Plus, I have these colors in the drawer since Christmas, and I'm dying to try them.
This is Acrylic Gouache by Liquitex. It's a new product, a reinvention of the classic gouache. Traditional gouache is opaque matte watercolor, so like watercolor it's resoluble in water and not water resistant. But the acrylic formulation solves these weak spots for our kind of works obviously. Acrylic gouache is highly pigmented, opaque matte acrylic paint. It means that it has excellent coverage and every single color is almost perfectly matte. Thanks to the acrylic binder, it's waterproof when dry, and like acrylic it sticks to many surfaces with great adhesion and solidity over time. This is obviously all theory, and I'm going to test them in different situations, but from the premises you can see why I'm so excited to try them. Also, 7-8 euros for a 60 ml pot is a pretty good deal. I bought on purpose only these 5 bottles. When I want to try new paints, I always buy only primaries and black and white. This is all you need to test to know if it's something that works for you and your style.
Okay, I lied. I'm using the airbrush to prime in black the model. You are a cheater! Airbrushing is not priming. I chose this model because it doesn't have in its scheme a single one of the pure primaries. The exercise is too easy if you use an ultramarine. Don't cheat, guys. Let's go immediately on the wet palette. Black and white, yellow, cyan and magenta. This is all you really need to paint almost anything. In the critical steps you can check what happens on the palette here in the corner. I'm tinkering with new shots and I think a view on the palette can be useful. I want to introduce you to the joy of sketching, so let's start with simple white over black. This is the first example of what I mean when I tell that you can do the exact same things with a brush. Sketching in black and white the volumes and values of the model is pretty similar to a zenithal highlight with the airbrush. In reality it's much better because you are in full control of every little brushstroke and the intensity and opacity of every little area. It's also a very fun process. Using the airbrush you trade control and precision for speed. The use of a tool or another depends only on your needs. Sketching you start feeling like a proper painter, because you have to lose the step-by-step mentality of GW tutorials. Painting is something fluid and organic that works better if not confined in the fixed steps. You can standardize the process to facilitate teaching and learning, but is not how it works in reality. I use only white in various dilutions to produce different gradients of grey. You don't need to mix it with black to obtain the effect. You already have all the black you need on the model. I start fixing the highest lights, painting in white the areas that will be more exposed to the light source. Then I connect these parts with the proper gradient of grey, simply using a more transparent white. You don't need to be precise in this first step. I'm looking for simple shapes and volumes, like cylinders and spheres, to fix a first impression of lights and contrast. I'm totally not worried about details. When I have the basic blocks of light in place, I can start to clean, refining the sketch. The gouache is behaving very well. It's consistent but more fluid than the standard hobby paint. The concentration of pigment is really high, and even when extremely diluted can mark and tint the surface quite easily. Only at the end I correct and define better some areas, using black in various dilutions and consistencies to produce another level of grey gradient. And this is how a 15-minute sketch looks like. Time to move to the exciting part, colors. I like to start painting the biggest surface of a model, and in this case it's a skin. Mixing your own skin tones is pretty easy, and on the palette I have all the essential use of a generic skin tone. I start with magenta, adding an equal amount of yellow to make a warm deep red. Then white to start bringing the mix towards pink tones. This color is good for a doll, but not for a human, or dwarf in this case, so I add a little bit of cyan to desaturate my master recipe. Natural human skin has a lot of green in its tones, and adding a bit of blue it will mix with the yellow I have already inside, creating that natural sensation. Pretty cool, eh? From here it's just a matter of adding white to create a whole progression of different values. In the extreme shadows I add a bit of red, and pure magenta at the end. I don't need more than that, because I'll work on top of the sketch that has already black in the deepest shadows to reinforce the lower values. Here again the same mix organized on the palette in a different way. This is just a matter of taste. You can prepare a fluid transition of tones or organize your hues and values in separate pools. I thin down a mid-tone of my scale and I apply a filter to the whole body. It will work on top of the sketch, creating a first modulation by itself. As I said, real painting is something organic and doesn't follow rigid steps. So in this stage I'm also adding other tones following the map of values of the sketch, just because I feel it. Deeper reddish tones in the shadows and lighter hues in the highlights. I'm basically working wet on wet just because I'm faster than the drying paint. The paint is quite transparent, something in between an heavy glaze or a light layer. I don't want to refine the sketch too much at this stage. I first need to see the relation with the other tones to decide the general direction, so I move to the next focal point, hair and beard. Let's take a moment to thank my best patrons. Our little community gets better every day, and I love the creativity that this flow of inspiration is generating. Thanks a million, guys! I mix a dark red using magenta and yellow, and I keep adding yellow to create different shades of a lighter orange. Later I'll add pure yellow on top of the scale. Using a midtone I tint all the parts, letting the sketch to do its job. And I immediately start differentiating lights and shadows, adding the tones I prepared on the palette. This is exactly what I do when I spray inks over the zenithal priming. You can see how everything is connected and just a different form of the same approach. The tones and the contrast become richer and richer while the layers of paint start to build up. It's clear from the brushstrokes that I'm still not concerned about details at this point. Details and definition will come later, refining the work on the basic volumes. If you don't get the right lights and shadows, details can't do much to save your paint job. And since I don't want to refine too much before having the general scheme in place, I move to the base tones of my non-metallic metals. I mix black and cyan to create a master recipe for my non-metallic silver, and white to see how it behaves in the lighter tones. I use these colors as a solid filter. When I feel the need to enhance or bring back the sketch, I apply darker or lighter tones, working over the wet paint. And I mix a brown using magenta, black and yellow to base the gold parts. I mix a bright green with cyan and yellow, and I move it to more natural tones, adding a pinch of magenta. These will desaturate the green, adding a brownish sensation. And I use it to prime the base. The plan is to leave the skull in the black and white sketch, to leave a testimony of the work done and show the difference between sketch and the final product. Here I feel that the base for the non-metals is too bright, so I simply apply a black wash to everything to tone it down. I've seen that there's a bit of confusion here. A wash is a technique where you apply a very diluted layer of paint on the surface. There are products named washes with this fluid consistency, but you can mix a wash on the palette even without a pot with wash written on it. I mix the tones for the non-metal gold. I start preparing a pool of the initial warm brown using magenta, yellow and black. Then I add more yellow to the mix to create the first highlight, a sand peanut butter tone. From here I need only to add white to the master recipe I already have. Pure white will be my extreme highlight. The secret for a good non-metallic metal is to keep it simple, with few strong jumps of value and tone. In this stage I use paint a bit thicker. From here I have to cover smaller surfaces, and I need more control and covering power for sharper tonal changes. It's just a matter of applying the tones I have on the palette. This time I use them one by one, without wet blending, to maintain strong jumps between the different reflections. I'll talk better about non-metallic metals in a series of videos dedicated to this topic. This is just to show you how easy it is to create a simple non-metallic scheme and pattern, and obviously to create some hype. I use thick pure white for the extreme highlight. Here is a little time jump. I refine the skin, hair and beard and some little details all around. At this point the job is very quick and simple. I have all the colors on the palette, with all the transitions and tones I could possibly need already in place. It's just a matter of softening those transitions and add details. Here the master recipe for a magical bluish non-metallic silver. Black, cyan and a bit of magenta, to create a tone pretty similar to Space Wolf Grey or Payne's Grey if you are more technical. And I add blue and white to complete the progression. Again, only 4 tones, plus white at the end for the extreme highlight. You can obviously create all the tones you want in the middle, but in general you'll need just these few colors for a good non-metallic sensation. I start working from the edges, adding the lighter tones in progression. Working on large flat areas like the key axe is easier to fix first the shiny, sharp edges. And often is already enough to get a good sense of metal. I glaze pure white in the corners to give the idea of a blurry, polished surface, incorporating the hard lines of the edges in the fake shine. And I highlight the handle with a mix of grey and magenta, in a couple of progressively lighter steps. At this point, all the tones, the contrast and the transitions are in place. I reinforce extreme lights and shadows, then it's time for touch-ups and finishing touches. And here it is! 2 hours and a handful of minutes, 3 colors, 1 brush and a lot of fun. I find sketching a very relaxing process, full of satisfaction in seeing the model taking shape and come to life in a constant way, brushstroke after brushstroke. The gouache behaved very well, used both thick and heavily diluted for glazes. I didn't find a lot of difference from other similar acrylic products, it's just a bit more fluid than expected, but still quite similar to the consistency of Kimera and Scale 75. Thanks to its watercolor nature and the fine concentrated pigment, it's really awesome for glazing. I'll definitely use it again for other projects.
I hope you liked this first episode. In the next ones I'll go into the technical details of the process, but in this first one I really wanted to show you how to paint with guts and the enthusiasm of the moment, having fun with every brushstroke. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe. Remember that you can always ask me anything down below with a comment, and you can follow my projects during the week using one of my socials. And if you want to support the channel and my work, check my Patreon page and its rewards, or ask for a commission. See you next week, guys!